benign prostatic hyperplasia. Next is surgical management. For surgeries, there are mainly two types of surgeries which can be done. One is minimally invasive therapy and the next one is invasive therapies. So first we will move about with minimally invasive therapy and later we will see about invasive therapy. So what does the term minimally invasive means? It is a procedure that consists of minimum invasiveness. So this is now it has become a common trend and alternative to the invasive treatment, and so it has less complications too, and they require minimum hospitalization, or sometimes they do not require hospitalization and catheterization of the patient for a long time. So these are the minimally invasive therapies that are available to treat benign prostatic hypertrophy. You just go through the names and we'll see one by one in detail. So first one is transurethral microwave thermotherapy. Okay, so don't think about the microwave oven, but think about the principle. So it is a thermotherapy. That is, the tissues of the prostate gland are exposed to extremely high temperature. So what happens when our body tissues are exposed to high temperature? You just imagine when you touch a hot pot or when you are exposed to hot vapor stream, what happens? You will get that scald or minor burns on your body surface. But think about major burns. What happens? There will be tissue destruction. So the same thing happens here. Transurethral microwave thermotherapy, that is an outpatient procedure. You does not need even to be hospitalized or admitted in the hospital. In that, what they do is they will deliver microwaves, that is high thermal waves, high energy thermal waves are delivered directly to your prostate gland, not anywhere else in your body. So how is it delivered to the prostate gland? It is delivered through a transurethral probe. So it acts like a probe, or same like how you do catheterization. A probe is being inserted through the urethra, and so that when it reaches the neck of the bladder, what happens? It is where the prostate gland is situated, and then this 113 degree Fahrenheit heat waves are being applied on the prostate gland. And what happens? The heat causes death of the tissues and when the tissues are being destroyed, what happens? The mass of the prostate tissues get less, and thereby the obstruction will be reduced or relieved. So this is what happens in microwave thermotherapy. To be more concise, it is application of high thermal waves or heat on the prostate glands in order to destroy the tissues of the prostate gland, and thereby it relieves the obstruction. So this is a picture that shows through which the thermal probe is being inserted into the bladder, neck, and where then they will start emitting the thermal energy or heat, and then the heat is being transmitted to the prostate glands and the tissues are destroyed and it will shrink. So during this time a rectal temperature probe is also utilized, because to prevent the rectal tissue damage, so that only the prostate tissues are being destroyed, to ensure the destruction of only the prostate tissues. So this procedure takes about 90 minutes, so almost 1.5 hours. Post-operative urinary retention is a complication. So after the transurethral microwave thermotherapy, the patient may have urinary retention for a while. So generally the patient is sent home with a urinary catheter for 2 to 7 days. Why? Because to prevent the complications due to urinary retention. And even the catheter inside will help to pass the small clots or the necrotized tissues, the tissues which are destroyed during passing of the high thermal wave, thermal energy. That tissues can also be passed out through the catheter. So after the procedure, antibiotics, pain medications and bladder antispasmodic medications are given. Why? Because we have inserted a probe, now we have catheterized the patient, there is chances of infection. So then the patient may have pain, obviously, because we are you just imagine when you just touch a hot object how much painful it is. So then imagine when you are administering or when you are applying about 115, how much we said, it was 113 degree Fahrenheit temperature to your prostate glands, how much painful it is. So the pain medications has to be given for some time, and a bladder antispasmodic medications, because after the procedure there may be spasm of the bladder neck that may cause urinary retention. To relieve that, antispasmodic medications can be given. Then the procedure is not appropriate for men who are having rectal problems like fissures of the rectum, hemorrhoids. Such people cannot undergo this transurethral thermotherapy. Anticoagulant therapy and antiplatelets. If the patient have any cardiac problems or any coagulation problems, these drugs should be stopped minimum 10 days before the treatment. Otherwise, what happens when the tissue destruction occurs? There is chances of high bleeding. Next is transurethral needle ablation therapy. It is otherwise called as tuna. Just remember tuna fish. So first one was transurethral microwave thermotherapy. This is tuna. That is easy to remember. Transurethral needle ablation. So this also applies the same principle of applying high temperature to the prostate tissues. And what happens when temperature is applied to the prostate tissues? That area, that particular area will be necrosed. That is meant by localized necrosis. Necrosis that is confined to a particular location. How does it differ from your microwave thermotherapy? So in microwave thermotherapy, they use low wave radio frequency to heat the prostate. Only the prostate tissue is in direct contact with the needle, thus allowing greater precision in removal of the target tissue. So in that in transurethral microwave thermotherapy, what you saw, it is you have seen in the picture how the catheter is being inserted and how the area is being exposed to low wave radio frequency waves. But in tuna, only the prostate tissues are in direct contact with the needle that emits the heat waves. So it is clear that only the prostate tissues will be destroyed during transurethral needle ablation therapy. Whereas in microwave therapy, the surrounding areas can also be, the tissues in the surrounding areas can also be destroyed. So the extent of tissue removed by this process is determined by the amount of tissue contact. So in microwave thermotherapy, it emits heat wave to an extensive area. Here it is a needle. So you just imagine the size of a needle. So the area which is in contact with the needle, only that tissues will be destroyed. And the procedure, this is also performed in an outpatient unit or in a physician's office. Local anesthesia is given, or if the patient is not that confident about local anesthesia, IV or oral sedation can also be given. and it lasts for only 30 minutes, whereas in transurethral microwave thermotherapy it lasts for about 90 minutes. During the procedure, the patient may experience little pain, and but they can return to their regular activities more early than compared to the microwave thermotherapy. The complications are almost same: urinary retention, UTI, irritative voiding symptoms, that is this increased frequency of micturition, urgency, difficulty in micturition, etc. Some patients require urinary catheter for a short term, and after the procedure there is chances of hematuria, that is passing of blood in urine, up to a week. Next is laser prostatectomy. So as the term suggests, use of laser beams to remove the prostate tissues. Ectomy means removal. So they use in this they use the laser therapy through visual or ultrasound guidance. So there will be guidance like as you perform endoscopic surgeries. There is an ultrasound or visual guidance when you insert the probe into the prostate region. And it is an alternative to transurethral resection of the prostate, TURP. It is a famous and most commonly used procedure, surgical invasive procedure to remove the enlarged prostate tissues. So laser prostatectomy is an alternative and minimally invasive technique to TURP. Here the laser beam is delivered transurethral through a fiber instrument. So transurethral means through the urethra the laser beam is delivered, and this laser beam is used for cutting, coagulation and vaporization of prostatic tissue. So when the laser beam is applied to the prostate tissues, that tissues are being, the enlarged tissues are being separated from the prostate gland, and it is vaporized because it is high thermal energy that is being applied to the prostatic tissue. So it will get vaporized and destroyed. Okay, so this is a picture that shows the laser prostatectomy. The transurethral, the instrument, a fiber instrument is being inserted, and then laser beams are being applied. This is the prostate, this is the bladder, and this is where the prostate gland is situated, and laser beams are being applied to the enlarged prostate tissues, and so this area will be removed. And it is why this area? Do you remember why this area? We have already seen that the enlargement happens in the transitional zone of the prostate gland. We saw different zones of prostate gland. If you don't remember, go back to the previous video and see the picture in which it is being shown. So only in the transitional zone the enlargement happens, other areas are safe. So the laser beam is applied to the transitional zone of the prostate gland, and the enlarged tissues are destroyed. Okay, next technique is photo vaporization. It is otherwise called as PVP. High power green laser light is used to vaporize the prostate tissues, almost same as your laser prostatectomy. So here high power green laser lights are used to vaporize the prostate tissues, and immediately after the procedure the patient will have improvement in urine flow and symptoms. Bleeding is minimal, and after the procedure the catheter is inserted only for 24 to 48 hours afterwards, whereas in the other two procedures we saw that the catheter will stay for 2 to 7 days after the procedure. And this photo vaporization procedure is used when the prostate gland is maximum in size or larger in size due to BPH. Next is interstitial laser coagulation. It is another technique of minimally invasive procedure for treating a enlarged prostate. The prostate is viewed through a cystoscope, and the laser beams are used to quickly treat small areas of the enlarged prostate. How? By placing interstitial light guides directly to the prostate tissue. So we here what do we do is by endoscopic assistance the procedure is used, and the same principle of laser beam is applied here also, and only particularly selected areas are destroyed using laser beams. How? They have light guides, interstitial light guides, and that is placed in particular areas and that tissues are destroyed. Next is intraprostatic urethral stent. So why it is used? The symptoms for obstruction in patients who are poor surgical candidates. So that is the patients who cannot tolerate a surgery due to medical reasons. Such peoples will go for this option of intraprostatic urethral stent. What happens in this? The stent is placed into the prostatic tissue to relieve the pressure on the urethra. The complications is, as you are inserting a stent, the patient may have chronic pain, infection due to the presence of stent, and encrustation. So what is meant by encrustation? You know what is a crust. Crust means a hard coating that may come and deposit on a particular surface. So what happens in this urethral stent, that crust formation occurs on the surface of the stent that is being placed, that can further lead to infection. Next we will move on to invasive therapies, that is the surgery. So we discussed about all the possible minimally invasive therapy. We discussed about 6 minimally invasive therapy, most of them which uses heat energy and laser beams to destroy the prostate tissues. And the last one, minimally invasive therapy, which we discussed, is the use of stent to reduce the pressure by the enlarged prostate on the urethra. And next is invasive therapy or surgery. And this invasive treatment, the doctors go for the choice of surgery when the size is too large, and depending upon the location of the prostate enlargement, as well as the patient's factors like age, the risk due to surgery that can occur, etc. So the surgery that is used to treat prostate cancer, first one is TURP. Remembering TURP, we have seen this when we were discussing about minimally invasive therapy. So transurethral resection of the prostate is a surgical procedure in which we remove the prostate tissue using a resectoscope inserted through the urethra. So the scope, that is, this is also done under endoscopic guidance. The resectoscope, that is a scope that has the features of resecting certain body parts or tissues too. So this resectoscope is inserted and advanced to the prostate tissue through the urethral opening, and once it reaches the prostate tissues, the enlarged portion and the transitional zone is being cut or removed. So this is the picture of a resectoscope. So it is inserted through the urethral orifice to the prostate gland, and the enlarged portion in the transitional zone is being removed. It is a gold standard for treatment, surgical management of BPH that is highly obstructing. And this is the most common surgery that is performed for benign prostatic hyperplasia. But now there are less invasive technologies that has come up. We saw all the minimally invasive therapies. So now the number of, obviously when there is something with less painful and less invasive is available, everyone will go for it. So the number of TURPs has declined when compared to the minimally invasive therapies. So how it is a surgical it is a surgery, so it is performed under spinal anesthesia or general anesthesia, and after the surgery the patient needs to stay at hospital for 1 or 2 days. No external surgical incision is made. So why to make an unnecessary incision over the body part? Because they are all inserting the scope through the urethra. So there is no scars or cut openings on the patient's body. So indwelling catheter is also inserted, which has a capacity of 30 ml balloon. So at the tip of the urinary catheter we have a balloon that gets inflated when we instill fluid into it after the catheter reaches the bladder. Why? For proper anchoring of the catheter on the bladder neck. Otherwise what happens after insertion, with a little pull or pull, what happens, the catheter will come out. So here also we are using a urinary catheter that is with a 30 ml balloon capacity. 30 ml balloon capacity means the maximum capacity of the balloon at the end of the urinary catheter is 30 ml. So if you instill more than 30 ml of fluid, it will burst, and if you are instilling less than 30 ml of fluid, what happens, there is chances that the catheter gets dislodged from the bladder. Okay, so this indwelling catheter is inserted to the bladder wall. Why it is inserted in the bladder? To provide hemostasis. This provides hemostasis and to facilitate urinary drainage. One thing is, when catheter is inserted, we saw that even after these minor invasive procedures also there is chances of bladder spasm. The patient may have urinary inability to micturate for several days. So the catheter is needed. Another thing is to provide hemostasis. How hemostasis? There is chances of bleeding because you have removed a part of the prostate tissue. So to maintain hemostasis, this bladder, this catheter balloon will, when it expands, what happens? It exerts pressure on the adjacent sides, and we know when there is chances of bleeding, a first aid measure is to apply pressure on the bleeding part. So this catheter, when you inflate the balloon of the catheter, it exerts pressure on the area which is at risk of bleeding too. And after the procedure, bladder irrigation also needs to be done. Either it will be a continuous bladder irrigation or it will be an intermittent bladder irrigation. I will deal with this bladder irrigation topic later on, but to match this context, I will just tell you what is bladder irrigation. It is washing out of the bladder. You have done a surgery, you have removed a tissue from the prostate that is closer to the bladder. There is chances of small amount of blood clots that comes. So when you wash the bladder, what happens? Same like how you wash your dishes. The clots in the bladder will also get removed with the washout fluid. So it is done usually in the first 24 hours to prevent obstruction from mucus and blood clots. So the clotting can be prevented, or the clogging of the urinary catheter can also be prevented by bladder irrigation, because it is washing out all the exudates, clots and mucus that is present in the bladder as a result of surgery. Outcome is, that is, the success rate is 80 to 90% after the surgery, and the patient will get relief from all the symptoms. The post-operative complications are bleeding, clot retention, dilutional hyponatremia associated with irrigation. So when you are instilling lot amount of fluid into the bladder wall, there is chances that the sodium level may also go less. So the patient may have hyponatremia. Next surgical procedure is transurethral incision of the prostate. So first one was transurethral resection. This is transurethral incision. So there is only minor terminology changes or word changes for this management. So just note that, make a note and try to not to confuse with the terminologies. In this is a surgery that is done with local anesthesia, and done for people with moderate to severe symptoms, whereas transurethral resection is done for patients with severe symptoms with a massively enlarged prostate. If it is moderate to severe, then this surgery will also do. In this, what happens is several small incisions are made into the prostate gland to expand the urethra, which relieves pressure on the urethra and improves urine flow. So in this, on the prostate gland, just like how you are pricking small balloons, because you saw that in prostate gland, in the transitional zones, nodules will develop due to prostate hypertrophy. So here they are making small incisions on the prostate gland, several small pricks or incisions on the prostate gland, which helps to relieve the pressure on the urethra by the enlarged prostate, and the pressure on the urethra is relieved, and difficulty in micturition is also relieved. So as we already mentioned, it is a procedure that is used for patients with mild to moderately enlarged prostate gland. So the outcomes are almost similar like transurethral resection of prostate. Next we come to the R point, that is nursing management. We discussed about medical management, surgical management. Next is the important part. For your exams, you get maximum of marks for your nursing management. So in nursing management, first thing what we do is assessment. So before carrying on with any care modalities, we have to assess and identify the problem of the patient. So first and foremost, we have to obtain the history of the patient. So now we know that the patient has come with the diagnosis of benign prostatic hyperplasia. So you have to check the renal symptoms or voidic symptoms, because we know that a person who has come with benign prostatic hyperplasia will mainly have urinary problems, or problems with voiding or micturating. So you have to ask the patient about his difficulties faced during urination. That is including the onset, when you first started experiencing incomplete emptying of your bladder, how many times you go to void a day. Do you have urgency of urination at night time? Do you wake up in between your sleep with the feeling of full bladder? Then the presence of urgency, because as the bladder is not completely emptied, the patient may always have that urgency feeling. Dysuria, that is difficulty in urination, sensation of incomplete bladder emptying, all these we have seen in the clinical manifestations. Then decreased force of stream. By decreased force of stream, imagine the example of a hose that is being blocked and that is open. So when it is blocked, there will be decreased force of the urinary stream. Determine impact on quality of life. So how far this disease condition has affected the patient's quality of life. Means, for example, you just think if he is an office going guy, that is, he is an employee in a private firm or a public firm, and he has who is always communicating, who has to always deal with customers, for say. When he has urgency, dysuria, sensation of incomplete bladder, on and off, what happens? It will affect his quality of life, not only professional life, even the personal life. Then you can check a rectal examination. You can palpate the size, shape and consistency, because when there is enlarged prostate, that you can determine through your rectal examination. You can check for abdominal, you can do the abdominal examination. In that, you always feel when the patients, we do this even for post-operative clients who are not catheterized, sometimes there will be enlarged or suprapubic bulge, that is the area where your bladder is situated. That area will be bulged and hard to palpate. So you can do this abdominal examination to detect the distended bladder. Also it helps to identify the degree of prostatic enlargement. And simple urodynamic measures, even the we can also perform, that is asking the patient to void into a vessel, then catheterizing and finding out the residual urine that is present in the bladder after micturition, comparing both the volumes to identify the level of compression on the urethra by the enlarged prostate gland. Next is patient education and health maintenance. So once you identify that the patient is having BPH, you have to educate the patient about the complications that can arise, the best available treatment options. So you tell the patient mainly what is the problem, urinary retention. So tell them about the complications that may arise even due to urinary retention, that is recurrence of urinary tract infection, cystitis, that is inflammation of the bladder, increase in irritative voiding symptoms. So irritative voiding symptoms we already discussed before. If not remembering, just go back and just rewind and see. Encourage reporting these problems. If also tell the patient if he happens to encounter any such problems, he has to report to you immediately. And also ask him to avoid certain drugs that may impair voiding. So there are certain over-the-counter medications like cold medicines. This contains sympathomimetics like phenylpropanolamine, and this will interfere with the bladder function. So ask the patient, already he is having benign prostatic hyperplasia. On the top, if he is taking all these sympathomimetic drugs, again his urination is going to be interrupted. So these sympathomimetic drugs that can cause stress incontinence even. So ask the patient to avoid this over-the-counter drugs. I hope you all know over-the-counter drugs, the drugs which are not prescribed by the physician, and with your knowledge that you have seen in the advertisements or you have heard from your friends or others, and you will go and experiment that drug on yourself. That is called as over-the-counter drugs. So avoid over-the-counter drugs when you are having such a problem, and take the medications. Even if you have a bad cold, go to the doctor, tell that you are having BPH, and then only start with the medications to avoid other complications. Also advise, we already saw that you have to advise the patient to avoid that it is even if the surgery is done, it will take time for this irritative voiding symptoms to resolve. That is, it may take some time for the bladder to return back to the normal function. So in post-operative nursing management, what you can do, you have to concentrate on the patient's pain level. You have to manage the pain, prevent infection by maintaining aseptic techniques, monitor for fluid and electrolyte balance. Mainly for these uro clients, you have to maintain a proper hourly intake and output chart. And those who have undergone transurethral resection of prostate, they may need continuous bladder irrigation. Why? Because the prostate is being resected, there is chances of bleeding and formation of blood clots. This blood clot can again cause obstruction of urine, obstruction to the flow of urine. So a continuous bladder irrigation will help to remove all the clots from the bladder and the urethra. And a person who has an open prostatectomy, they are at greater risk of venous thromboembolism. So this venous thromboembolism is not only a complication of open prostatectomy, it is a complication for almost all the open surgeries. Because of reduced mobility, the patient may be on bed rest for some time, and it may cause thrombosis or thromboemboli to form. So you have to maintain a routine prophylaxis to prevent the emboli formation by giving low dose unfractioned heparin. So this will release the blood clots that are being formed and reduce the risk of venous thromboembolism. Tell patient post-operatively to avoid sexual intercourse, straining at stool, heavy lifting, long periods of sitting for 6 to 8 weeks after surgery. Why? Because all these may cause strain to your bladder and your pelvic region. So until the prostatic fossa, it is freshly cut open. So you have to wait for 6 to 8 weeks till your prostate is healed. Otherwise it may cause strain on the freshly opened prostate, and then it can lead to bleeding and other complications. Advise the patient to come for regular follow-up visits, and after treatment they have to come for follow-up visits after treatment, because there is chances of regrowth of prostate after this surgery also. So they have to come for a follow-up visit regularly to check if there is again a regrowth. Also ask them not to take all these over-the-counter drugs that claims that they will treat the prostate enlargement. They may not be much effective for them, and on the contrary they may cause health instead of causing benefits, they may cause more complications to them. Discharge and home care guidelines. Now the patient is ready to get discharged. Now they are going to home. So before going home, you will fill them with some good knowledge to prevent complications at home. So you have to give a written instruction or oral instruction to monitor urinary output. Also tell them about strategies to prevent complications. What are the strategies to prevent complications? We already discussed. What all to avoid, what all should be done. Also teach the patient exercises to regain urinary control, because as already I have mentioned, it will take time for the bladder to come to its normal functioning level. So they have to undergo certain bladder training exercises to regain the bladder muscle controls. Avoid Valsalva maneuver. So Valsalva maneuver is excessive straining to defecate. This Valsalva maneuver increases the strain on the pelvic region, and it may again injure the damaged prostate tissues. Avoid bladder discomfort. So certain foods that may cause discomfort to the bladder includes spicy foods, alcohol, coffee, etc. That has to be avoided. Increase the fluid intake. Ask the patient to drink enough amount of fluid. Complications of benign prostatic hyperplasia includes acute urinary retention. The patient may not be able to void because of the obstruction. Involuntary bladder contractions that may even lead to pain as well as dribbling of urine. Then bladder diverticula. So what is meant by diverticula? You might have learned this in your GI system also. That is outpouching, or see, these are abnormal pouch formation on the wall of the bladder. Why does it happen? Is this is due to the excessive pressure on the bladder wall due to retained urine. So the bladder wall may outpouch. There is certain small pouches will form on the bladder wall. This can again lead to infection and pelvic discomfort. Cystolithiasis, that is stone formation into the bladder. Vesico-uretral reflex. What is meant by vesico-uretral reflex? That is backward flow of urine. After the bladder has waited for so long to the urine to drain out through the urethra, so it is not happening. Then what happens? It will the urine will start back flowing back to the kidneys. Hydroureter, it is dilation of the ureter. Hydronephrosis. What is hydronephrosis? It is a condition when the swelling of the kidney occurs. Why this kidney swells? Due to urine is not being properly drained from the kidney to the bladder. Bladder is already filled, so the kidney cannot drain urine into the bladder. I'm sorry for that. Then gross hematuria. Hematuria, you already know, urinary tract infections can occur. These are some of the nursing diagnosis and the possible nursing measures that can be done to manage that. So first and foremost, nursing diagnosis is urinary retention related to mechanical obstruction, secondary to an enlarged prostate, evidenced by frequency, hesitancy or inability to empty the bladder completely. You can match up with other related to and evidenced by points 2. So what is your desired outcome? enable the patient to void properly, and make the patient feel that the bladder is properly emptied. So okay, you can just go through the nursing interventions. You have to encourage the patient to void every 2 to 4 hours. So if you are a periodical voiding will help to remove the maximum amount of urine and help to reduce the increased amount of retained urine in the bladder. Ask the patient about stress incontinence. What is stress incontinence? When the patient is laughing, coughing, or exerting or lifting weight, or any activity that may cause increased pressure in the abdomen, leads to dribbling of urine. So ask the patient if he have any such experiences while laughing in a public or in the family time. While laughing, he involuntarily he has passed urine or so. So you have to ask for that. These are all due to the distended bladder, and when the abdominal pressure is increased, it may exert pressure on the bladder and the urine may leak. You have to observe for the urinary stream. A weak stream indicates obstruction. Always maintain a proper intake and output chart. Ask the patient to move. If not catheterized, ask the patient to document the amount of urine voided each and every time and to report to you. Then percuss and palpate the suprapubic area, because I already told you, when you palpate the suprapubic area, it will be distended as well as hard to touch when there is retention of urine. Increase the amount of fluid intake. To prevent the complications of UTI, you have to monitor the vital signs, because there is when there is UTI, the patient may go into hyperthermia. Hypertension can also occur because of inadequate removal of the waste products. Watch closely for signs of post-obstructive diuresis. See, what is meant by post-obstructive diuresis? For a period of time, your bladder was not able to empty the urine properly. After the treatment, now there is no obstruction, so there may be chances of increased amount of passage of urine. So it can lead to hypotension also. Provide and encourage meticulous catheter care and perineal care. So if the patient is on catheter, you have to provide aseptically catheter care and perineal care. Recommend sitz bath if it is indicated. It will help to promote muscle relaxation. Next is pain. The patient may have pain due to distended bladder. It may be related to mucosal irritation, and the desired outcome is the patient should feel relieved from pain. So here you can provide the comfort position to the patient, assess pain of the patient. So I hope you know the PQRST assessment of pain. If not, please comment. I'll do another video on PQRST assessment of pain. Then tape drainage tube to the thigh or the thigh, and the catheter to the abdomen. This will help to avoid the unnecessary pulling and traction on the bladder. Ask the patient to take adequate bed rest. Provide comfortable positions such as back rub. Prevent patient assume position of comfort. Provide a comfortable position. Encourage use of sitz bath, warm socks. Insert the catheter and attach to straight drainage as indicated. By sitz bath, it will promote muscle relaxation and reduces the pain. Catheter insertion will help to empty the bladder properly and reduce the pelvic discomfort due to incompletely drained bladder. Instruct in prostatic massage. So it will help to in the evacuation of the prostatic gland and relieve the congestion and inflammation. If you have infection, if the patient have infection, don't ask them to do prostatic massage. The medications can be administered as per doctor's order for pain relief. So that's all. If you have any doubts, you can put in the comment section. I will answer to your comments. Thank you.